Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Let me know if you can hear me okay. And let us know where you're coming in from. I see Peter's from Halifax. Awesome. Edgar. Got a couple questions that have popped in already. Just a reminder, if you want to hop on screen today, we are offering that we can do a little bit of hot seating. So today's going to be a little different than maybe some past episodes. If you do have a specific question, make sure to put it in the Ask a Question area below. And you can also vote on questions. So if there's something that you want to see answered specifically, make sure to upvote it. Awesome. Vancouver, Vermont. Very cool. And I'm just going to maybe add a quick poll because I'd love to hear, are you already using relational databases? Just added a poll there, so please feel free to answer. Just here to see the plants. Hey, Justin. Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to read through some of the questions that have already come in. I'm happy to show examples from my space. My space definitely relies heavily on relational databases, but I also don't want to fire hose you and maybe overwhelm you. So I want to make sure that I'm kind of meeting you at your level. Hey, Sonia, Irene, awesome. Okay, so TL asks, I'm looking to mesh lots of creative pursuits together in a way that helps me tackle them in a productive manner. Most have lots of moving parts, small tick boxes for bigger projects. Is there a way to use relational databases that can help me balance the rest of my life with actually getting progress done in the creative sphere? Right now, I'm very all in or leave creative stuff lapsing. It's been tricky to stay productive and balanced. Awesome. So TL, I'm curious, are you interested in coming up to chat through this and kind of how we might solve this for you? I can give you some very off the top of my head, my own sort of interpretation of that. And I think part of that is that you're maybe not treating your own creativity like a project, right? And so this is something I've learned personally, that anything that's going to get done has to be on my project list or to-do list, just like any other client project, with real deadlines and real milestones. So it sounds like for you, your creativity kind of has to be something that you're always making at least a little bit of time for. It doesn't have to be hours every day. Just a hobby. Yeah, I mean, I put like anything that's a project, even if it's something that I want to do around the house or sewing or things like that. I definitely make those projects inside of my Notion workspace. And I try to make sure that every project has at least a couple next steps, next to-dos. And in your case too, I might recommend setting aside a specific block of the week, whether it's a weekend, whether it's during the week, Friday morning, whatever, just set aside a couple hours just for you, just for your creative work. Even if it's 15 minutes a day, I think it's so important to bake that stuff in, and you'll be more motivated to do your regular work stuff. So I can show you sort of, some of you have seen my task management before. I can do a bit of a screen share, but I include all of my personal and my business tasks together in one dashboard. So I don't personally distinguish different views or different databases for creative or non-creative work. I kind of keep everything in one database. That would be different if you're working with a team. But yeah, I'm happy to share my screen and kind of share with you kind of how I handle that. But it is tricky to stay productive and balanced at the same time, for sure. There's also a concept, I can't remember what book I read this from, but it's called The First Hour is Yours. And I really like this concept. It's super simple, easy to remember, but the first hour of the day is yours. And that's to do whatever you want. If that's reading, if that's creativity, if that's drinking a coffee, and uninterrupted and not working on client work or business stuff. First hour of the day is yours. I think that's a really, really great concept. And I think it really contributes to your work outcomes as well when you're happy and creatively fulfilled. So first hour of the day, maybe think about that. Even if you just started with 15 minutes a day, I think you'd really notice a difference. And so I think sometimes we look to a tool to solve things that are often related to our own habits and rituals, right? So there's things you can do, of course, in Notion. Like I found Notion has been really helpful for almost tricking myself into being more productive. The daily journal has been a thing that's been really transformational for me personally. And I just love being able to kind of, tick off those different boxes and have emojis and drop downs and that sort of thing. So that's been helpful for me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think this one is almost more of it's less about relational databases specifically, and it's more about deciding in advance, I think, how you want your time to be spent, and then just making sure that however you decide to set up your task database, whatever that looks like, trying to set up Notion as a habit builder. So again, I'll do a quick screen share if it's helpful for you to see how I handle this. It's always a little bit tricky to not share too much personal stuff, but here we go. Okay, so I've got my weekly agenda here. Some of you have probably seen something like this before. So I have my task database embedded inside of my weekly agenda, and there's personal stuff on here. There's project stuff on here, business, client stuff. All of this is mixed. I could, of course, also say, I just want a separate view. Maybe it's creativity, right? And this would show you, in fact, I'm going to duplicate this because I like the view. And I'm going to call this creativity. And then you could choose to show by filter, only show me things that are by type. Type contains, I don't actually have a creativity filter, I don't think, but like only show me personal stuff, right? And so you could, using filters, really refine kind of what you see and have kind of different contexts. You could create a different dashboard. You could have your creativity dashboard and your business dashboard if you wanted to, and only highlight the things that are most important. I have a bit of a Marie HQ for this, so I would almost recommend you'd want to create your own dashboard that surfaces creativity first, right? So if your creative projects are the thing that you feel are missing or not getting enough attention, I would probably embed those near the top. Similar, like I've got some goals here at the bottom. I've got projects and goals, and I can see my progress with each of those. So you might have something that's a bit more like create a creativity habit. That might be a goal. And then as part of that, you might say maybe your outcome is start with like 2 hours a week for your creativity, right? And you could set that as an outcome. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I think it's a little bit of the tool, and of course it's a little bit of putting some of those habits in place and really committing and treating your creative work like you would a client. So I hope that's helpful. I saw a couple questions have popped in, so I'm going to take a peek. Okay. And yeah, let me know, TL, if that helps, and if you want me to go even deeper into maybe how that might work on a dashboard. Okay. Gary asked, imagine organizing your life around what you found most profound and beautiful. And that's in quotes. Maybe interesting to take a vision for 2020 and then use relational databases to show how to pull that through your quarter, month, week, day in a concrete way that provides weekly feedback and guides your decisions around projects, reading choices, how you spend time. Tiago Forte's para method is based on something similar. So I didn't necessarily hear a question in there, Gary, but are you wanting me to kind of dig into how you would actually set that up or how you would do that? Yeah. Yeah, progress bar. I mean, that's basically what I'm doing here. So for every single goal, like let's look up Become a Rule Number One Investor. So that's a book that I was reading, Rule Number One. And I always try to have at least one next key result. So I know that the next step is basically I need to create my personal investment criteria. So what is it that makes a good investment? And then I've got next actions. And again, this is a relation to my actions database. So this one's a relation to my key results database. You can show this information so many different ways, right? Now the target and current, there are ways you can do some pretty crazy stuff in here with formulas. I do this as just a number. And so the progress is basically just calculating the percentage between these two items here. And you'll see I've got a number of relations here. So I've got year, quarter, month, and weeks. These are all the weeks that this was the focus of the week. So when I'm in my weekly agenda, first thing I do when I open up the week is I pull in what are the major goals that I have for this week? What am I trying to achieve? What do I need to do? so that basically in any view that I'm in, if I'm in my monthly view, I can always see the weeks and I can see my bigger goal. It doesn't matter kind of how zoomed in or how zoomed out I am, those bigger goals are top of mind. And so I would encourage anyone to do the same thing. If you want to build more of a creative practice, a creative habit, it has to be visible. And I know for me personally, as a designer, it's got to be visual, right? Like to have these sort of inspiring images to inspire you and to encourage you. So make it beautiful. And, if these goals are more important, I've thought about this, it might even make sense for me to have the goals at the top, right at the top, instead of my daily journal, because my daily journal is embedded inside my weekly agenda. It might actually be just more helpful to see my goals there first. So I think that's the beauty of the dashboards and the fact that you can embed databases inside of pages, and as many times as you want with as many filters as you want. You need to design on purpose kind of what you want to see on a day-to-day basis. So I hope that helps. So the progress bar is a formula, and I will definitely share a document after this office hours is done with anything that was mentioned and referenced. I will, let me just jump in and quickly show you what that looks like. There's lots of amazing Notion pros out there that are like way more advanced than me on the formula side of things. So I often will just kind of, take pieces that I want, and I will adjust them and edit them for my own use cases. So this is the formula here. I don't know if maybe I can copy and paste that in the chat window. I don't know if this is useful or not. It might get formatted weird, I don't know, but I will share a Notion document at the end of this where you can access that formula, and I'll send you a couple references of folks who've made a number of variations of this formula. But you'll see, like if I say that's 3 out of 5, that automatically adjusts the percentage, which I love. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with formulas, and roll-ups as well. So as soon as you have a related database, you can actually roll up information from any of the relations here, basically. So I'm just going to take a peek here at the question. So Gary, I hope that sort of elaborates on kind of how that might function in terms of pulling those goals and visualizing the data through the different like quarter, month, day, year. And I do have a YouTube video on that, but I could go into a little bit more detail about that. Okay, a roll-up is awesome. Okay, I'm going to share with you my journal, because my daily journal, I use a lot of relational databases and a lot of roll-ups. So here is next week. So there's nothing in here yet. So this is like a fresh new week. So what I do is I create my new agenda for the week. This is something I'll do every Friday or every Sunday. And I will go through and I will create a new entry. And so this will be February 24th. Open that up. And you'll see there's a lot of data in here. And I will scroll down because that's a Monday. I click Monday. I've already created a template for that. Blam, all this beautiful stuff pops up. Okay, so you see there's a lot of different, anywhere that there's an arrow, that means there's a relational database. So as part of my process every week, I create an agenda entry for every single day. And then I go through and I decide in advance what is the most important thing that needs to get done that day. And so that, again, is a relation to my master actions database. So maybe I'll say, I know I need to do that feature. I need to do this. I can also type new things in here, do that thing, and I can add that to the database right from here if I want to. And then this is a roll-up. And what this does is, I'm going to open it up so you can see. So what it's doing is it's rolling up, it's looking up an existing relation, which is my highlight here. It's looking at the property of done. So it's looking at the property inside here. So like what works feature, see how that's not done. If it was done, let me click it as status is complete. And then go back. Then you'll see it clicks the highlight as done. So just to show you that the roll up here can pull status data of whatever relation you have. And they can do that for a number of different properties, which is pretty fun. So I'm just going to go back, make sure that that is not complete because I don't want that to mess with my thing. Okay, so highlight is one of them. That's one thing I will do sort of at the beginning of the day or beginning of the week, really. I go through, put those entries in, decide on the highlights in advance. You'll see I've got a connection to my knowledge hub, and that's everything that I'm reading, listening, learning, courses I'm taking, etc. So I'm taking the accelerator course right now, so I might add that as part of my focus for the day. Content is my content calendar. So as I go through the week and I snip things through my content calendar, I relate them to the day that I publish them. And then you'll see if I scroll up here, let's see here. Oh, so this date is wrong. That's actually March. That's actually February 24th. Great. Okay. And then as I go through and I start filling out more of this information in these journals, I connect the week to those entries. So I know that February 24th is here. So as soon as I clicked February 24th, all the information that I put in priority actions and knowledge hub shows up there automatically. So as I go through and I do a daily journal and I put my gratitude, my wins, let's put some in there, like, whoa, this is awesome. Yay. This was hard. And again, I do this at the end of every day. I find having it in this database format just makes it really easy to kind of quick capture notes. I can always go through at the bottom of the day and kind of put things in more detail, but this kind of gives me a high level view. Get outside, awesome. And you'll notice like those get pulled in here. So this actually pulls in a week's worth of wins and gratitude and everything. So when I go back to the agenda and I look at it as a table, I can see all of this beautiful data. I can look at just the wins if I want to and kind of keep myself encouraged. So there's just so many possibilities when you connect up that data. So hopefully, Torin, hopefully that makes sense in terms of, I know it's a lot to wrap your head around. I often will I'll set up properties and I will play with it. I'll say like, okay, what could I connect? Let's configure this. Let's create a connection that doesn't exist. Okay, so my goals database here. So I can pull in any of these properties that are part of the goals database. So whether I want to pull in the month, the progress, let's see, show original. Now, because I don't think I have a goal connected, it's not going to show anything here. Okay, here, let's pull in a goal. Let's pull in my rule number 1 investor, reduce client workload, right? And so then you can see this property is pulling in pulling in the status of those goals, right? From the progress bar. Let's say I want to pull in the month. It's pulling in the months where that was the most important goal. Or let's say I want to, let's pull in all the projects that support those goals. I can pull in all the weeks. So I often will honestly just play with these roll-ups. I often will explore and say, what could I pull in? What data is going to be most helpful to me? What's going to challenge me in that process? Really, the sky is the limit with this stuff. So sometimes I'll just like set up a property, play with it and be like, that's actually not that useful to me, and I'll delete it. So I would often encourage you not to be afraid to play a little bit. You can't really go wrong. So yeah, hope that helps. I love messing around with roll-ups and stuff. I know we had that weekly office hours with Didi, and he's very intentional too with the way he fills out his weekly agenda. But I find the daily journal has just become such a habit. Like I cannot go to bed if I haven't done my journal yet. So I know that is something that I do every day. And I know that by filling that out, my weekly agenda is going to start to really fill out. And I love looking back at my weeks and just kind of seeing, how productive was I, what was my effectiveness and all that. But the real fun, I think, is over time as you start filling out your content hub, your knowledge database and all this stuff, you can really start to see trends and sort of, oh, I know that like February was really productive for producing content and, this month, not so much. And you can just really start to look at patterns in your own behavior, which I find is really fascinating. So I'm just going to take a peek at are you able to track hours to tasks and goals? Yeah, I mean, you certainly can do that. I think you may want to have either like Like our actions database does have a field, I believe, for hours, and you totally can track hours. Especially if you work at a company where you do need to track your hours, that might be a consideration. So I would certainly build that into your actions database. Let's move this back to on deck. So if I'm adding a new task here, new thing, open that up. I think we removed the hourly status, but yeah, I think I would probably assign a number here, you know, like hours. It could be a drop down. You can also do formulas when you use hours as well, right? So you could have like estimate. I think we used to have estimated hours, actual hours, and we had all these formulas. And it was kind of too much, and so I actually do it more by effort and impact, which again, you could do this so many different ways. It really depends on whether you're using Notion for work, for personal, what have you. But for example, if I say something is essential, that basically means it's super high impact, but really low effort. It's something easy, but it's going to be really, really valuable in my business in some way. And it just means like, I need to get this done. It's super important. Deep work is going to require a lot more of my mental RAM, focus, concentration. I need no interruptions to do it. It means it's going to be high impact, but high effort. And then small win is going to be low effort, low impact. And then if it's high effort, low impact, I call it daily grind. And then basically it yells at me that I need to delegate this task, which I really love. So here, I'll show you what that looks like. I usually have this turned on. So I can see, I need to delegate that. I need to delegate that. And yeah, you can set up your formulas to yell at you if you find that very motivating. So yeah, Dominique, if you need to track hours to tasks and goals, one thing you might want to consider is like if this is related to a goal, here, new goal. There's a few There's a few different ways you could do this. So goals could have, you can see there's a next actions here, and I would probably do a roll up of those hours. So I would set up a roll up, and I'll have to double check if I put hours in, but basically we want to pull the time from next action, hours. And you can summarize, show sum. So you'll see there's 0 here, but if I say this task is actually going to take like, where's my hours? Oh, here we go. That's going to take like 4 hours. So I'm going to put 4 in there. So if I jump in here to my new goal, you can see that's a roll up of the hours associated with that goal. So that's one way you could do it. At the task level, I mean, you could also kind of give an estimate too of like, that's kind of why I have these target and current, like how long do I think this goal is going to take? That might be in weeks. Often I'll do that in weeks and say my target is 12 weeks. So if it was like, post a video to YouTube every week for 12 weeks, and maybe I've only done 3 out of 12, that's one way that I've sort of contextualize how far along I am with that goal. But then you could still definitely do these kind of roll-ups or hours. And that's where, again, I find the power of relational databases comes in, because a goal is probably made up of a number of different next actions. So I would probably associate the time it takes with the actions themselves and not the goal itself. So I hope that's helpful. Okay. Okay, so Sandra let me just double check here. I can add another entry here if you want to see what that looks like as I add more information. So let's add another couple tags in there. Whoa, such gratitude. And I'll always make sure to add the date in here. And I mean, admittedly, this journal is like, I think, pretty advanced. It's not necessarily something that I would say is beginner. The fact that I have my journal embedded inside of a weekly agenda with lots of roll-ups and stuff, I know it's a bit more of an advanced setup, but just to show you the power of what is possible. Okay, so you'll see nothing shows up here until I actually connect that agenda. So as soon as I click 25th, you can see those new properties pop up. Right, so that's why I generally like to make all of the entries for the week, connect the journal to all of those, and then I can start plotting in what are the most important things. I also do this with meetings. So you'll see I have a meetings database, and I will actually go through and say, office hours. And I can create a new page in office hours. And I can say Friday. So you can actually do inline date mentions. And then I'll click on this because that will give it the Notion emoji and tag it as Notion. You can see that's another related database. And then what I can do is show all of my meetings here. Meetings. Oh, did that not show up? Oh, apparently I did not actually connect that. Notion office hours. There we go. Didn't actually add that. Okay. And then I can see that visually too. And I do like to adjust that a little bit so that my meetings appear at the bottom. Great. So yeah, as you can see, that starts to fill up the these roll-ups because these relations are already created. Let's take a peek at the questions. Okay, so Courtney says, when I want to play, I create a duplicate of the table and try lots of things, then take what I actually want and apply to the original table, then just delete the duplicate. This eases my worrying of messing anything up on the original. Yep, that's a great point, Courtney. Sometimes I'm careful about duplicating databases only because I have so many different relations in some of them, but I do have some testing databases where I do like to play around with that. Piotr asks, do you have any methods like getting things done to boost productivity? Yeah, I sort of use like adapted versions of a lot of things that I've learned getting things done. Tiago Forte's para method of organizing. Yeah, I've read all the productivity books. I definitely sort of have my own sort of points of view and adapted them in different ways, but essentially I think everything needs to be a project. Like if I don't create a project, it's not going to get done. It's just going to be an intention that sits on a list somewhere. So I really have tried to actively turn anything that really needs to happen into a project and always make sure there's at least some next steps. As you can see, as I've mentioned, having kind of thinking of my tasks in terms of their impact on my business. The Deep Work. So Deep Work is an amazing book. If you haven't read that one, I highly recommend that. And that's been really helpful for me. And again, just, you'll notice I don't have like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in terms of the tasks. It's more like what needs to get done now, next, recurring. Even you'll see later in some days is kind of hidden. So I could actually show those if I wanted to. But yeah, that's kind of what's been helpful for me. I'm going to dip in and check out the questions here. Okay. Clarity, relating a database to itself, creating a parent to child or task to subtask relationship. Would you kindly demonstrate how to create it, what might be a good use for it, in a page view, in a related property, how to add this type of database item? Thank you. Okay, so definitely, one way that I use this relating to itself is, so I'm in my Knowledge Hub right now, and if I open up one of these, you'll notice I have a related notes. Oh, hang on, not that one. Learning. I have so many. Oh, there we go. Okay, related reading. I've since changed this a little bit, but I might say like related knowledge. So one simple way is just that there might be various notes that are connected. So the index fund bubble. We'll actually do this because I don't think there's, oh, here we go, net. Let's relate that to the net worth spreadsheet. So that's one way where you can like connect various notes to others, which is great if you're doing, writing, you're putting a talk together and you're kind of going down the rabbit hole with a certain topic. You want to be able to kind of quickly relate those notes together. I do also do this with my master tags database. So finances. So if I jump into finances, I can see all of the related reading notes that are related to finances. Can also see projects related to that, calendar items, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one way where you can like connect a database to itself. And then the other way would be to relate tasks so that you would have like a parent task and a child task. So I could choose here, relation, and choose actions again. And you can, yeah, sync it both ways or use the same property. Let me do both. Okay, tasks or actions. It's always tough to do this in your own database here, because I don't want to mess stuff up every time poor Ben logs into his account. He's like, what are all these new tasks? Task test. Okay, so if I click into this one, so that one won't show up, I think, because I did the one-way relation. Now this might get a little bit tricky, and it might be better to start out a fresh database before doing this. But I would think that you could definitely do this for like parent and subtasks. But my own personal experience of that, if I have like a task here that has subtasks, I tend to actually put them in the body, you know, like this. And of course, that's personal preference. It really depends. I know our task database is already pretty beastly. And of course, almost every task for me gets associated with a project, almost. And you'll see I have a number of the templates here, right? So if I click on a new house task, for example, that's already connected to the house project. If I click a new IANLA task, that's already connected to the IANLA project. So really, to me personally, there isn't too many reasons why I would want to connect tasks to themselves, because I can simply go to my project page and see all of the tasks that are related to those projects. So if I turn on these properties and I see tasks, I can see all of the tasks that are related to each of those projects. I can click in, access any one of those. So of course, that is personal preference. You absolutely can relate a task to itself if you find that helpful. Hopefully that answers your question, Edgar. Let me know in the chat if it does. How do you solve hierarchy hell? Way too many layers inside a project list. Interesting. Too many layers inside a project list. I'd be curious. I don't know if you want to hop on and chat about that more, Fayan. I guess I don't personally experience this hierarchy hell. I'm mostly operating in my weekly agenda where I'm handling all of my tasks. I've got my projects database that has all of my projects in there, and every project is connected to the tasks that need to get done. I only add the data that I need to. Like, I don't go through and add every single property to every single project, because not every project has the same importance level. Not every task has the same importance level. So I don't know if you want to clarify on any of that, the hierarchy hell. I haven't, and maybe that's related to how you're setting it up. Layers inside of a project list. Not sure if anyone else can relate to this. Because, I mean, really, you can make your space as simple, as complex as you want to. So maybe we'll come back to that one. Yes, TL kind of just pointed out as well. Like, I think it's important to make the views that make sense for you, right? Like, this might look like too much work in progress. It probably is too much work in progress, right? Like, this is everything that's on deck right now. But it might be more helpful to view things by like, what needs to get done really just this week, right? That might be a way that I can filter this. Or maybe I just want to see the creative tasks that I have this week. Or maybe I don't want to see it by today, tomorrow, next. I just want to see like a master list of everything that I've got on the go. Actually, this one isn't even filtered by not complete. So let's do that. Status is not completed, right? So you can view this in any number of ways. I have this sort of default on deck, but if that's not helpful for you or feels too overwhelming, or I know that I don't need to see this yet, I only want to see like what's really on deck, that's totally up to you. Great question. Sandra asks, can you talk about your decision to separate out years, quarters, and months into separate tables instead of combined? Yes. So what I love being able to like zoom in to the level that I want to see, and I do my sort of yearly planning, a sort of big picture, like what do I want to do this year, and I start chunking it down into like, well, what's realistic in terms of what can be done this quarter or next quarter? What are my goals? I find that, and if you've read the 12-week year, I've talked about that book before. I love it. Humans are really bad at estimating their time in general, let alone a whole year. So it's easy to say that you want to do certain things in the year, but if I don't break those down into more manageable chunks of time that I can wrap my head around, then it's not really going to get done. I haven't necessarily sanitized my space exactly, so I'm not sure what this looks like if I click in on these. Right, so like, I can, click into a year and see all of my goals for that year, and I can see whether they were done or not. I can jump into one of these quarters and that sort of thing. I like to put a theme together, and again, I can jump into that quarter and then see all the content that I produced in. Well, there you go. You get to see some sales. All the goals that are related to that quarter, the theme of that quarter, the months that were involved in that, and my goals. And to me, I need to break that stuff up into a smaller thing. Otherwise, it's just too nebulous. It's too big. And they're all connected, right? Relationally speaking. So like everything is kind of one click away. I can like zoom in, I can zoom out. The months are also... Whoa, okay. As you can see, there's like a lot of roll-ups happening, and I haven't sanitized that space. So you can see, summaries of all of my gratitude, all of my highlights and whatever at any level. So I can kind of see it at a monthly level, or I can see it at a yearly level. I just find that context is helpful personally for me. I had thought about before, I did experiment for a while with an all-in-one calendar, because I thought if I'm tracking my gratitude on a daily basis, could I also track it on a quarterly and monthly? But I just found it a little bit unwieldy. So I prefer the separation, but of course it's so up to your personal preference, and you can totally design it any way that is helpful for you. So please don't feel like my setup is the only one that makes sense. It's definitely the one that I've evolved over, 2 years of playing with the tool, building habits, getting projects done, seeing where things slip through the cracks, and then adjusting and being like, ooh, okay, where are those projects that are lighting me up? And so it's just a lot of testing and playing and figuring out what works for you. So 12-week year is a great book. If you haven't read that before, it has definitely, I guess that ties in with the productivity question about which methods have kind of influenced me. But the 12-week year has been one that's been, I find, really, really helpful for actually getting things done. So I hope that helps. Also, just want to put it out there too, if anyone does want to hop up and kind of workshop or work through anything, you're totally welcome to come up. We can pull you up. Let's see, Rebecca asks, can you also clarify how to relate goals, projects, areas, and resources? Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways you could do this. Okay, many of you have probably heard me talk about Tiago Forte's para method. I have a slightly different way of doing this. And part of this is because I share my space with my husband. So we, like, Okidoki is our company. And so everything here is like our business shared areas, basically. So Okidoki is essentially a very similar equivalent to areas. And we've got our household shared areas. And then we have our projects. Tasks is one thing that Tiago doesn't really go super deep into in terms of para. So again, this is a slightly adapted version of para, actions and archives. And then each of us, my husband and I, have our own private dashboards here. So you can actually see another level of para. So my active clients projects are in this toggle. Areas here, planning. Planning could technically be an area, but I want these like accessible one click away. And then resources. So resources used to kind of live out here, but they were pretty much my resources and not Ben's resources. And it wasn't really making sense to have as like a top level item. So now it kind of lives under my personal private resources. So you can see, like, depending on whether you're working with a team, depending on however you need to work, I've made a little bit of a adjustment to Para in general. And so there are places where I don't necessarily, for example, link everything to resources, but I will link it to like Knowledge Hub, for example. Some of these are more personal, like these are personal notes that I'm making, but I often will connect things to Knowledge Hub. So let's open up. So you'll see here, like you can see a few of these resources are connected to a project. So like, let's say I open up, someone did ask what the Big Ready is. The Big Ready is a conference with Mike Vardy. It's happening next Saturday in Vancouver. So if you're in Vancouver and want to join us, I can shoot the link there. So I have a talk that I'm prepping for that. And so you can see there's a number of properties here. So the Big Ready, client is me. These are the tasks that are coming up. It's a deep work in terms of its size. Here's all the connected notes. So you can see that's my notes database right there. And because this is my personal Knowledge Hub, I can link this up to as many databases as I want, and I'm not cluttering things up for Ben. I can see the weeks that it's a priority. Here, I can see, as you'll see, this is related to projects as well. So I can see if there's any related projects, I can put those in there. Any content that's related to it. So you can see I sent out a tweet that was like, hey, any Vancouverites coming out? So this, in a way, I sort of see the Knowledge Hub, but also the project page becomes this like almost a homepage that summarizes all the related elements that kind of connect it together. I can see what sprint I was working on. I don't have any key results in here, but I could certainly say the key result was like, have a finalized talk that's ready to go or whatever. Inspiration, any related inspiration I can pull in there. And part of like this talk is related to my goal, which is to create a permaculture business framework. That's like a bigger goal of mine. And this talk is helping me flesh out those ideas. And then again, here are some additional resources that's another link to the Knowledge Hub. So all of those are connected. And so I've got, my messy notes at the bottom here. And then so anytime I need to, I can jump into this and see everything related to that project. Right. So I hope that helps how you relate to your goals, project area. So I don't necessarily link this to areas, right? Like I could say areas is maybe speaking. That might be an area, but I don't necessarily need to create a whole separate area for that. That's personal preference. But I could go back here and, this always evolves over time. So there might be a part where I'm like, oh, maybe as part of my marketing, I would actually have speaking, right? And then that evolves as a space that I can then tuck in any of the talks that I've done and relate that, and also relate that to my content hub. So if I give a talk, that's technically content that I'm putting out there, and that might be something I would tuck away in the content hub. So I don't necessarily very granularly relate everything all the time. But for me, the most important thing is that I have goals that I've put out there somewhere, and that I have projects that are going to move me forward to help me meet those goals. And then again, through the Clipper, the Notion Clipper and Knowledge Hub, I'm saving things that help support taking action on those projects. So I'm not just like saving things into my like I used to do this with Evernote. I've talked about this before. I just used to like save, clip, and then things would just kind of never be surfaced again. But I'm being very intentional now. When I save information, I'm asking myself, what am I using this for? Is this for a project? Is it for increasing my financial knowledge? Is it for writing this talk about permaculture? What is it? And so whenever I clip something, I immediately try to tag it and associate it with something as much as possible. Not always, but I do try to kind of think in terms of what are my next actions and why am I saving this information? So I hope that's helpful. Every quarter I will go through and I'll kind of look at my quarterly goals and I'll say, okay, do these still align? Does this make sense? So, we're mid-February now, but as part of my weekly review, I try to look at those quarters as well and say, okay, well, what's coming up for Q2? I know that if I got invited to do this talk, well, then that's going to have to then go into Q2. And so you're always kind of adjusting slightly because, again, what you said at the beginning of the year, when maybe you did your big year planning, is going to adjust as new information and new opportunities comes in. So the goals are kind of higher level. They're just the things that I know that are important that I need to do. But of course, the projects evolve and even the goals evolve to support me as new information and new opportunities pop in. Somebody asked, did you get those cool texture cover pages at Creative Market? Yes, I did. I can also include the link to those as well when we follow up. Okay, someone... pages or subtables. Sandra, can you clarify what your... I'm just going to try and catch up on the chat here. I know a couple things popped up here. Yeah, Torin, I know that, like para, projects, areas, resources, archives, it's a great framework, and I think there's room for it to kind of adapt to your own needs a little bit. I think it's a really great starting point. I think there was another question there. Yeah, para is more of an idea than a rule. Everyone seems to adapt it, but it's quite useful. Okay, not relational to database specific. When a project is complete, do you remove it from your projects database? Great question. I don't, at least not during the year. I would put the status as completed or archived, and then when we show our projects, we're only showing the active projects. If we are finding that we're just getting so many projects that we're needing to clear out the database, we would do that. And we did that last year. So at the end of 2019, we went through and archived everything that was, finished. And we did that with our tasks as well to kind of clear out the task database and thin it out. So I don't necessarily remove it. One thing I do often recommend to create a duplicate of your database. So we have this for tasks. Under archives, we basically have a task database, tasks archive that's like a similar-ish task database than our active tasks. And we just like move any of the complete things that have been complete for more than 6 months or whatever. We would just Command-Shift-P and move those into that database. So you could do the same thing with projects. If you had a project database, and that would allow you to kind of store and save any information, maybe any relations that you wanted to keep, but moving them into a different database. So I don't worry too much about moving the projects out until kind of the end of the year, because sometimes, like if I'm working on a talk now, I'm working on a talk in September as well, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to want to like dip in and kind of pull pieces from that project. So for me, it's not really cluttering it up to keep it in there. So that would be more of a yearly thing. Sandra was asking, can you differentiate between areas and resources? Also, I was going in circles setting them up. I was resistant at first too. It took me a while to kind of wrap my head around it. The way I think of the difference between areas and resources, I mean, areas are they're almost like topics a little bit. So they're areas of responsibility. They're ongoing things, right, that you're responsible for in your business. Like marketing is an ongoing thing that I will be responsible for. But a guide to email marketing is a resource that I might use as part of my marketing. And then I would have a project that would be like, write your welcome email newsletter, right? Or whatever. So you can see there's like a couple different ways. It's almost like a contextual way of looking at the information. But the beauty of Notion is like marketing can be a page, and inside of marketing, I can embed my knowledge hub and just filter it to show anything that's tagged with marketing, right? So I almost see the areas kind of like little home pages. So anything that's related to Notion, I will embed all my Notion related projects in there and embed any knowledge hub stuff in there that's tagged with Notion. So these become almost like containers that pull any projects, pull any resources together by theme. And that's, again, just a way that I've discovered, I think is a helpful way of doing it. So let me know if that helps clarify. So Sandra asked, the page you're on right now, the Okie Dokie Home, are those pages with headers and whatnot, or just tables? So this is a mixture of like some of these are databases, some of these are pages. I think my content hub is a database here, super simple. Case studies, also database. But then marketing, for example, will be like affiliate stuff, my bio, guidelines for writing a good post or whatever, as well as my embedded content hub, and as well as any like marketing resources at the bottom. So some of these are pages, some of these are databases. I used to do, all of my areas were database entries before, and I actually started to find it getting a little bit unwieldy, because the properties that I want to store are very different across a number of these different topics. So it wasn't really making sense for me. That's how you got stuck. Yeah. Yeah, and so these are just headers that I kind of think of in terms of groupings of how I group these different areas. And again, you could look at finances as an area of my business, but then these are almost like micro areas underneath finances. But it's so up to you. Sandra said, if marketing is a homepage and the tables go in resources, why not just organize resources? Well, okay, so there are a million different ways you can think of this, Sandra, but I find the areas is a place for more, I don't know, messier thinking. So I might go into marketing, and I've got my content hub here, but maybe I also want to embed like other things. Maybe I also want to embed notes about a thing, or chuck a PDF in there, or like a meeting I had with someone, or whatever it could be. Like it almost allows you to just containerize a number of different resources. I still do organize my resources. Like if I go to Knowledge Hub, I can view this by, tag. I can go to ecosystems and see all the different notes and reading. But I find my resources tend to be more database heavy, whereas my areas are a little bit more free form, and they allow for kind of messy thinking, dragging stuff around. It's not so structured. So like each of these notes is like an article or a book, or like they're a little bit more substantial, and they can be like categorized. Whereas, and again, this is just personal approach, but some of these might be a little bit more organic. So I won't necessarily show you my sales database here, but in the sales database, I have like Gumroad, like a database of all my Gumroad data, but then I also have like lists of all my offers with like how much revenue each of them brings in. And it's kind of, it's again, almost like a homepage with lots of different types of data all on the same page. So it kind of creates this little container. A lot of that stuff just doesn't really live in my resources. Resources might have something like guide to profit first, like a YouTube video that I found that was like how to do profit first, right? It's the resources support you continuing your areas of responsibility. So I know it's a lot. It definitely took me a while. Very contextual. Yes. Okay. I answered what's the big ready. How did you connect the icon to a property? Jeff asked. I'm not sure I follow your question, Jeff. Can you clarify in the chat what you mean? How did you connect the icon to a property? Does anyone know what he means by that? I can come back to that one. Great distinction, Peter. Yeah, areas relate to you very specifically, like your health resources. Resources are more general. Yeah, 7 steps to running a life, blah, blah, blah. That's a great way of looking at it. Because yeah, these are all things that like relate to our business, right? Or like these are my house plants. But in my resources, like in here, I have like a home and garden resources, right? And then I've got like a plant list. So that's like sort of a more universal resource, but that's something I can dip into. But yeah, these are all like personally related to us. This is like our and inside investing, for example, I have notes that I'm making about investing, and a little embedded database of the Knowledge Hub, filtered by investing and that sort of thing. So it's like pulling in the resources that I need that are related to my area of responsibility. I know the plant list is super nerdy. I found this plant list CSV online and I imported it, and it's so nerdy. I'm happy to share it with you, Justin. Unfortunately, it wouldn't bring in the images. And then I was like, do I? And I think that would be not a good use of my time. So I haven't. But yeah, you can open up any of these and see like hardiness and all this stuff. So I thought about it, and then I decided that that was probably not a great use of my time. It was very tempting though. Okay, do you track your habits? For me, my habits are just in my my weekly agenda or my daily, right? It's like I have exercise here, so I've got my drop down, and those are usually pre-populated based on the template. So for example, Wednesday is cardio cabaret. So that's already pre-filled in. And yeah, part of my habits are just having like daily gratitude and tracking my wins and lows and whatever. For a while there, I had like water and meditation, and then I wasn't doing it. And then I was like feeling bad about myself. So I was like, no, I didn't find that motivating or helpful. But to me, like daily gratitude is really important. But if I was going to put that stuff back in there, I would have like a checkbox here, right? And just say, like, you know, work out or like water or whatever it is that you want to track. And I do that on a daily basis. And then you can like see on a weekly level in your agenda, you can see everything that had the tick boxes. You could do roll-ups to be like, how many of the 7 days is that box checked off, right? You can do lots of cool stuff like that. Okay, so I haven't heard from Jeff in terms of how did you connect the icon to a property, so I'm not sure about that one. Sorry, Jeff. Okay. Do you find your setup and database views are more suited toward a desktop workflow? Yes. I'm assuming you mean like versus mobile. Although I do fill out my daily journal toward the end of the day. Often I'll fill that out on mobile. And I think that's what's easy kind of about the database format at the top, where I can just kind of plug that stuff in. But yeah, most days I'm at my desktop working on Notion. So yes. And again, you can look at 100 different Notion pros and you'll see everybody's setup is so different. And you know, if you're brand new, just kind of seeing this for the first time, you might be like, that seems so messy and bananas. Like, why would you do that? And I've definitely looked at other people's setups that are quite advanced, but I'm like, oh, I just can't, like, there's just too many places to click or whatever. And it doesn't feel messy. And I think that's because all of our brains work very differently. The kind of information that we want to see at any given time is different. So that's just something really important to remember. And also, again, that this has evolved over 2 years, and it's so based on my own habits. And there's no right or wrong way to do that. But I do encourage people. I think some people get afraid that they're going to, you know, mess something up or do it wrong. But I often say, like, add properties, play with them, see what Notion is doing. And it takes a bit of time, but don't be afraid to kind of get you kind of have to get your hands dirty a little bit when you're learning how to use Notion. Okay, someone said, an hour later, you get tired of tracking habits and don't do any work. A page for storing your templates in buttons, game changer. Yeah, you'll notice I have a lot. I have, templates for my journal. I have templates for my agenda, templates for tasks for sure. If there are tasks that you do over and over again, like for example, anything that's like a highlight task, that's like a key, super important task that needs to get done. I kind of have those so that they have different properties. In fact, I might even say like that's essential, right, as part of the template. Outcome driver, right? So you can kind of create these ways of visually signaling to yourself that certain things are important or personal or whatever. Thanks for coming, Peter. Yeah, Conrad has a great session on gamification of productivity, if you guys enjoyed that. Emojis in the names of your properties. Okay. So, I mean, anytime you create a new thing here, you can click on the add icon, right, to add something new. Or if you're using a template and I click on one of these, then that's going to associate a new icon with that. So again, if you have icons that you want to see over and over again, if you're using Notion, you know, you're clicking like 100 times, 1,000 times a day, right, with all these like little adjustments. And so anytime I can save myself a couple of clicks, I make a template for that. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, Justin, reach out if, you know, I can always share some templates, share the plant list with you. Cool. Thanks for coming, David. First time streamer. Hopefully you've gotten some enjoyment out of this. Okay, how do you set up templates? I can't seem to figure out other than inline pages. Okay, so are we talking database templates? How do you build a page to sort them? Do you just pull a template and drag it over? TL, do you mean a database template? How to create a new one of these? New template, new special task. And I would add an icon. And then any properties that would be associated with that. Basically anything, and you'll always notice at the top of Notion, it's got like you're editing a template, so you kind of know that that's what you're doing. So let's say a special task is automatically has an effort of like deep work or something like that, right? And maybe it's, again, you can kind of choose like special basically whatever properties you want to kind of preemptively fill out that you know any special tasks. So again, if you're working on a specific project and you know every day you've got tasks associated with that project, you might want to create a template for that. And of course, you could also have like a ton of different like headers. You know, you could have a whole list of things that you want to have preemptively ready to go. And so if I say new special task, that's ready to go. Great. And I'm going to associate that with, let's see, day is today. Right. And so this is actually creating an entry because, I think this is filtered. Oh yeah, it's not assigned to me as soon as I assign. And that's actually another great thing that you can do too, is like assign it to yourself, especially if you're working with a team. Someone did ask in the chat earlier, a super important distinction, especially for those that are trying to figure out how to work with their teams as well as their own personal tasks. There is no way to share a filtered view with your team without them being able to see everything that's in that database. That's a super, super important thing that you need to know. And so if you are, again, working with a team and you're trying to figure out like, how would I, handle personal tasks, anything that you don't want the team to see, I would honestly, unfortunately, create a separate database for that. And you'd have your own personal tasks, and you could have like tasks here and then like business tasks. And I would definitely separate those. So that's something to be aware of. TL was saying, I was also thinking of making a template for non-database tables, like new blog posts that has little drop-down menus. Yeah. Oh yeah. You could definitely say new blog post and have like a whole post to social media after, and like proofread and whatever. And I mean, you can get pretty. Let's just do this. Let's go a little wild here. What's this filter here? Oh, okay. I had a weird filter there that was preventing that from being seen. Okay, so let's say this new thing here is actually a blog post. You could have a bunch of pre-made tasks. So like write blog post, decide subject, post to Twitter, whatever, like your actual list of blog stuff. Then what you can do if you wanted to, this would be something I would recommend probably doing in a a template, database template, but you would basically re-embed your task database inside of your task. Set up any filters that you want. So like this is like blog post, whatever. Doing this very fast, just to illustrate kind of what you could do. So filter it. Maybe you want to filter it by tag or whatever, and then you could just actually assign those and drag them in, right? So if you wanted to have these free floating things assigned with dates, assigned with people, like let's say there's 20 steps and you work with a team, you could kind of have your template pre-spit out a bunch of these, but then you can say filter by TL. I know that she's responsible for these two, blam, pull those down there. Then you could change up the filter again and change it to your different team member and then drag the other ones in there. So you have a lot of flexibility with like whether you do things as like free floating to-dos or as sort of those like database items, because what's nice about dragging some of those things into the to-do list and assigning it to the team member, when they have something like this, those are then going to pop up in their dashboard. So that's one thing to be aware of. One thing I may have been doing wrong, I thought my new template is only related to the database I'm working on. Action database has action templates, or do you store all templates within the action template? Can you create a new template for another database? Okay. No, I think I know what you're trying to say there, Marta. So Actions database can only contain templates for the Actions database, but you could embed, like this special task here, I can open this up. I can embed any other database in here that I want, right? I can embed that Actions database in here, and that's gonna be baked into the template. But I can't create other database templates. Like I can't create a journal template in my Actions database. This is all unique to this database. That's a great question. I hope that clarifies. Yeah, okay. Okay, just reading through just to see if I didn't miss anything. Does that clarify those questions? I'm just going to check the ask a question area. Okay, Rebecca asked, how do you handle recurring tasks? So for myself personally, you see that I have the recurring here. And so Notion doesn't have like an automatic recurring date situation. But what I would do is say, I know that I want to do this on Saturday, set up a reminder one day before the event. And then once that date comes up, I will reset that date. And I have a day, today, tomorrow, next, later, someday, and recurring. And then that way when I'm in my week, it's always there. Like I always see it. It's a thing that is kind of pinned there and always needs to get done. You could also, again, you could show this in so many different ways. You could show that as a list in a different column. It's like, show me all like the weekly recurring items. You could even put them in here as like to-dos, build it into your template. There's so many different ways you could do it that are outside of the norm of kind of how Asana might handle it or how a to-do list might handle it, but you just kind of have to design for the situation that you want. That's how I handle it. I find that keeps me aware of what needs to happen every week, and it's really not complicated. So that works for me. I hope that helps. Do you review current quarters on a weekly basis so you can roll up info for the yearly review? Yeah, exactly. So I do, as part of my weekly review, I try to, I think I've included it in my, here, like every week, process the inbox and everything. And I also have a monthly template. Let me show you my monthly, whoa. It's a lot. Okay, so let's just show you my template here. I think it's baked in here. New monthly review. Okay, so basically, and all of these are linked, right? So I can like click into my goals database, click into my projects list, review areas of responsibility, review my narrative vision, knowledge hub, summarize any database entries, etc. So this is kind of and again, I should have something like this in my weekly. I sort of do, but it's not linked the way this one is. So that is something that I try to do. And yeah, so one thing I've done recently is I've set up some roll-ups. I think I might have shown you some of this stuff, like all of my wins, lows, challenges, meetings, content I'm creating all gets like rolled up in like quarterly, monthly, whatever, including sales. So I import my sales database, and then I can see how much did I earn this week, this day, this month, this quarter, this year. I can see all of it in any kind of context that I want, which I find really helpful. And yeah, exactly. So when it comes time to do the yearly review, all of that data is like right there. And it's, really interesting just to see. And I think what's also cool about it is we tend to forget what we've done, right? It's like toward the end of the year, you're like, oh yeah, in the spring, I totally forgot that I did that thing. So it's just a nice way to track your progress. I think we're all sort of guilty of continuing to like reset the goalpost. It's like we hit a goal and then we're like so busy like resetting the new goal that we kind of forget how far we've come. That can be kind of demotivating. So I like having a visual way to see everything that I was up to, and associating images with each week and each month. And then when I look back, I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that we'd like traveled to Fino and to Austin and all this stuff. And it was just, I find that very motivating and helpful. And yeah, so I hope that answers. How many times a day do you check Notion, and how much time per day or week do you use Notion? I could probably find out by logging into Rescue Time. I don't know if any of you use Rescue Time. I don't know if I've been logged in a while. The truth is I'm in Notion every day. It's where I do all of my planning, all of my project notes management, learning, like so much of that all happens inside of Notion. So I spend a fair bit of my day in Notion, but I'm not spending a ton of time building my Notion. Like my Notion has kind of built out over time. So to me, the system itself is very low maintenance because I've been using it for so long, and it's quite intuitive now. Like the fact that I can go into my my daily journal and fill out all that stuff, right? At a minimum, that's all I need to do is like, okay, did I do the highlight? Okay, energy, effectiveness. Like I've made it so easy for myself with these drop downs, right? That it's just that's very easy. At a minimum, if I just do that and fill out these like gratitude, wins, lows, and what can I do better, that's kind of like bare minimum, and that's very easy for me to do, right? That's like a few seconds. So even if I only did a few seconds a day, and then just like, yeah, ticking off my tasks, and then anything that I need to do those tasks is connected to the knowledge database. So like I'm in there like accessing data, working with it, moving around. Again, Notion is my second brain. I don't think it necessarily has to be for it to be useful and helpful for you. So I'm just logging into my, no, I think I haven't had my Rescue Time active for a little while. So I can't tell you with specificity how long, but yeah, this is where I do all my project planning and everything. So it's a pretty big core part of my day. Like I almost never use Google Docs anymore. I don't use Evernote. Really the only other thing I use is BusyCal, just to check my meetings and click on Zoom links to access my meetings and things like that. Otherwise, yeah, this is kind of where I spend a good chunk of my time. Someone said, when you created a new item earlier, you changed the note icon to a Notion image. And when you did that, it appeared that it was then registered as a Notion item in a property further down the page. Yes. So Jeff, I think we clarified that, but if essentially, that's part of the Notion template. So if I click on this and edit, you will see, and in fact, let me connect. Tags, I could probably, tag that with Notion. I don't think I have a link to my master tag database, but yeah, basically anything that you want to have happen immediately, right? Like the Notion icon and assigned to me and tagged with Notion. That's kind of like anything that I want. So if I create a new task, new Notion thingy, I open it up, I'm basically applying that template. So I can click on that and that applies those properties to that to do. So that is essentially just a database template. So they appear here as long as you haven't added any content here. Like if I hit delete, those properties appear again so I can access them. So if you're ever like, why can't I find them? If you click your mouse, as soon as you have any kind of content in there, those options disappear. So just hit delete and then those options will appear again. And again, just to remember that they're all stored here or in the body. Hope that helps. Love the sales idea. Can you tell us the difference, what the difference is of those 3 sales properties you have and where they each go? Okay, now I have to remember which page I was on, Brittany, when you saw that. Would that be on like the monthly basis or the weekly basis sales? Okay, so I mean, I don't necessarily want to open up my whole sales database. It's got, you know, all sorts of client information in there. But essentially, I have a database of sales, right? All the transactions from all of my invoices and everything are in that sales database. So as long as I have put, I basically import the sales database as a CSV. I merge it with my existing sales database. So this is like a weekly activity that I do, import the data. And then I just highlight the entries to batch change them all at once. And I will batch them and just say, all of these are associated with February 24th to March 1st. Great. All of those sales get populated in here. And this is going to pull the number property from those sales. So each of those sales has like a dollar amount associated with it. That's going to pull all of that in automatically and give me my sales for the week. It's definitely a very technical thing. It's all the same, Brittany. So this is like on a weekly basis, and it's also the same in the monthly. So I'm like careful here because I know this isn't necessarily set up. So like February 20. Yeah, so this is, pardon me. And as you know, sometimes I like, I play with data a lot. So sometimes I'm like, oh, can I do this as a roll up? Like this is pulling the subtotal from sales up here. And then I think this one is, when I first did it, the dollar sign wasn't showing up. So I was using a formula to add a dollar, but I actually don't think I need this property anymore. Let's delete that. Yeah. So yeah, that took me, like, again, that's something I only started doing in the last month or two, because that is definitely a bit more of a technical thing and it is a bit more of a manual process. But I also don't mind because it means I'm very intentional about, like, I'm very aware of what I'm earning, like what's coming in on a weekly basis, and I'm paying more attention to it. It's not just like this automatic API is like sending data into a database. So every week, it's like kind of part of my weekly review that I import everything and assign it to the week, and I go, oh, that's interesting. So I hope that helps clarify. Inside the template, you can add a link to an external database and have it filtered with some static properties, but can you set up a filter that depends on the properties of the new page created within that template? You can't filter relational databases. So for example, if I'm connecting this to a project, but I only want to connect it to like projects that have a status of complete, or I know some people had questions about that before. It might have been on Twitter, where like you'd have a project and tasks are being pulled in, but then you only want to pull in the tasks that are active or complete. You can't do that yet. Hopefully in the future, there might be more sophisticated functionality around that, but I don't believe that's, if I'm following your question correctly. Okay. Are you adding files directly or linking? Example, what did you do with what was in Google Docs? And are you terrified of having everything in one system? I mean, a lot of my documents still live in Dropbox. Like I still have a lot of Illustrator files, Photoshop files, that sort of thing. So I'm often still linking to Dropbox folders and backing those up, and also have those locally on my machine. So yeah, I'm not necessarily super scared, because I guess a lot of the most important for me, the importance is like the relationships and the connection between, again, like tasks and supporting resources and knowing where things live. Like it takes me a second to find out where anything lives, where certainly like 2 years ago, it's like, oh, where did I save that? Where does that live? Like, it just felt really messy. And now, like, I pretty much know where everything is, and it takes me like 1 or 2 clicks to get to almost anything that I need. So to me, like there are trade-offs, of course, to every piece of tech that you use and every way of doing things. But for me, the benefit I've gotten from the integration of all of these different pieces of data and the productivity that it has allowed for me, like to build my effectiveness, to me it's a bit of a risk I'm willing to take. And Google Docs, yeah, Google Docs, it's easy to lose things in Google Docs for sure. And I know lots of people that are in the process of transitioning to Notion, but they still do their task management in Asana, and that's totally fine too. You know, Notion is a really great like document hub, team hub, a place to kind of keep all of your protocols, your processes, resources, etc. But it doesn't have to be the place that you do every single part of that. So that is something to consider. I just find the benefits for me have far outweighed any like potential downside of if I lose my information. I mean, the information I'd be losing is like all of the reading and notes that I've created, but that's stuff that I can export in a CSV file in Markdown as part of my like monthly process to do backups and export that stuff. And yeah, it'd be a pain in the butt if I had to move it. But again, I just think I just get so much benefit in the interim that to me, I just keep doing it. So yeah, sometimes I will drag, like I'll drag a PDF sometimes right into a note. Other times I might link it in the URL. Like you'll see I've got a URL field here. So sometimes that does link out to an external document. So hopefully that helps clarify. Cool. I think we got through all of the questions. Oh, someone asked about, it's BusyCal, B-U-S-Y, Cal. Not VisiCal. I've never heard of that one. Yeah, BusyCal. I really, again, I love being able to, you can tag items in your calendar. And so if I tag something as physical activity, it shows up as yellow. And like, it's so simple, but I personally love to be able to like visually see my time in terms of my energy levels and context, right? Like, I just feel like thinking of things in terms of context is so helpful. So deep work, you know, is a different color. Paid client work is green. It's like, that's where the revenue comes in. Meetings and sort of deep work are like purple color. So again, it's so simple. And I know you can do a lot of this stuff in Google Calendar, but I just am not a super huge fan of the design. So I just really love being able to like tag items in BusyCal. Does anyone else have any additional questions or things that maybe you've been trying to figure out how to do in your workspace and you'd want to come up and we can kind of workshop it? You want to share your space? I'm happy to stay a bit longer if people want that extra support. Lots of great questions came in today. So thanks for sticking it out and being so patient. Thanks, Edgar. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your support. I hope it's helpful. I know it's a lot when you're first learning this tool because it really can do so much, so much. I feel like every month, I mean, every month it's just evolving just a little bit, It's like 1% better every week. I'm like, oh, that's a cool feature. Oh, that roll up. I didn't know that you could do that. And yeah, it's really fun. Cool. Justin, thanks for coming. I'm glad that was helpful for you. Yeah, you almost have to treat building your Notion workspace as a project itself too, right? And kind of set some time aside for it. And I think it's very easy to get overwhelmed, but I think if you can figure out what's going to be like the highest value way that you use Notion. For me, I think the surprising way was I'm just going to delete some of these since they're not real. Was the daily journal, and from there the weekly agenda. I think really I kind of dove in on Notion because I was trying to find a weekly agenda format that worked for me on paper, and it was not working. And so the fact that I can make this weekly agenda look and show whatever I want it to be was really habit changing. Like it really forced me to have like, I don't know what it is about it, if it's the visualization of it, if it's I don't know what it is, but it has really allowed me to be consistent and to show up, do the journal, do the weekly review. And I feel like that has really, really helped me get out of reactive mode and be a lot more planful, intentional. Like I think we tend to have way more tasks on our plate than we think we do. And so that's why I find the Kanban view is so helpful. Some of you might have heard me talk about the book Making Work Visible, but this idea that we always have so much work that's in progress, and that's what kind of keeps us from making traction. So I think I was, I just had so many things on my to-do list, and you almost kind of forget about what you've committed to. And so obviously Notion can make it quite visual, and you're like, oh, that's a lot of stuff. And I think that's what has kind of helped me be a bit more proactive. So it's taken a bit of time. But I just encourage you to think about what for you is going to be the highest value. Is it creating a weekly agenda that really, really works for you? Is it setting up a habit tracker on a journaling or weekly basis? What does it look like for you? In some cases, it might be just getting like a simple task management Kanban board or something like that together. So start with one project at a time. Don't feel like you have to build the whole thing all in one go, but just could you get like 5% better, right? By just having a task database that you has the right properties for you, it has the right templates for you. So that's my spiel. Can you show the filter for only showing this week's dates in the weekly board? Okay, yeah. So one thing I will say on that note is I don't always give everything a date. I only give a date property if there is really like, this really needs to get done by this date. So if I filter this by only everything this week, a lot of these things are going to disappear. So let's do that. Let's duplicate this and call this this week. Oops. And thanks for staying, anyone who's still here. Okay, so this week I'm going to filter this and say, I can say date is, a few different ways you can do this. You can say is within the past week, or I can say date is after specific date. And so I could match this up with like my February 24th. Yeah, and I could also filter that to say and is before March 1st. Really depends kind of how you want to do that. But that's basically how I would do that. Does that clarify? Yeah, let me know if that clarifies, Teresa. Only showing, and you could also do something like, is on or before today. And you'll see different things disappear depending on what was done there. But I prefer to sort of keep it all there, regardless of whether or not it has a date. Because sometimes things need to get done later, but it doesn't necessarily need to get done on a certain date. So that way, if I'm super productive and I plow through all my today's actions, I could kind of go down the board and say, well, what could I do? Like, do I want to do something that I've been putting off, or it's on the later category, but I could totally just do it now. So hopefully that helps. Cool. How about creating a jar, a jar for all 146 people to toss what they're using Notion for? Formula. Okay, so we do have a formulas whole formulas 101. I think that's next week with William Nutt. I'm so excited about that. So if you want to dive into that, that should be a pretty 101 level. And we'll definitely share some formulas with you there. I'm not exactly a formula expert. I mean, I have a couple in here. Like these are sort of like, pieced together from pieces of other people's stuff, and then I just kind of put what I wanted. So it's clunky, like it's not something I'd want to do in real time while I'm like copying and pasting and having people like ask me what I'm doing and be like, I don't know, I'm just testing things. So there's a lot of tinkering that's involved for me personally anyway when it comes to formulas. So I know it's not super straightforward. So I'm excited to have William help us with that. Cool. Awesome. Well, I think we plowed through a ton of information. I hope that was helpful and useful. Also, again, if there's specific stuff that you want to see in these office hours, just mention me on Twitter or post it in the sidebar here. Want to make these as useful as possible for you. I know there's like a lot of different topics we can cover. So don't hesitate to reach out, ask questions. If, again, you want us to theme a future episode around anything in particular. I know there's still lots of gaps around teams and task management, and also kind of dividing your space between personal and teams. So definitely let us know what you want to see so we can craft these around your needs. And again, if anyone ever wants to come up on screen, we're always happy to kind of help you workshop something specific. And yeah, thanks so much for coming, everyone. Hope that was helpful. Thanks for joining us, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye for now.